the value of a pension, where I see it is just like Social Security. It helps you reduce how much you're actually going to take from assets you saved. If you are just solely relying on pension and Social Security, depending on what you spend, it may not be enough.
Yeah.
Because over time, costs can go up.
Welcome to a Wiser Retirement Podcast. Are you curious about if pensions are worth the wait? I'm Casey Smith. Today, I'm joined with Senior Financial Advisor Shauna Theriault. Each week, we bring you practical advice on retirement investing and planning for your financial future. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening. Let's get started. Hey, Shauna.
Morning. How are you?
Doing good. So, what's new with you?
Nothing. Maycember's over, so the kids are out of school, and I guess this is going to air on June 23rd, which is actually my birthday week.
Oh,
so there you go. That's
happy
new.
early birthday.
And we're talking about pensions. That doesn't make me feel old at all. Pensions and getting older. That's great.
I got a weird text from you recently. You were like, I biked to this place on the square and it's great. You sent me this menu, some Mediterranean place.
Yes.
I didn't even ask you about the restaurant because I was like, bike. And in my head, I had you like pedaling down Church Street, fighting all the traffic, going, man, Shauna's like, living
I'm a really
on
avid
the edge.
biker.
And like really avid bike. Yeah. You're wearing like the U.S. postal outfit as you're cruising through town.
Right.
I knew you didn't do that.
No.
And I totally forgot about the Wiser Mile.
Right. We have this whole trail behind our building.
So they're behind our building, right between us and the Marietta Market is, it's longer than a mile, but
yes, it is.
I think you can ride it from
mountain
the square.
to rivers, M2R. So it goes from Kennesaw Mountain. It goes all the way to the Chattahoochee River. But the bike path ends way before that, which I discovered.
Oh, does it?
Yes. And then you're just on streets. And then that was scary. So we turned around.
Right. So anyway, we have a whole mile that we're in charge of when it's cleanup miles. We don't actually own the mile.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we go out there.
I told Lily we own the mile, though. She was very impressed that you owned a whole strip.
We have a whole strip. So it goes right past the Wiser office, this trail. So if you're into riding bikes, you could come park, I guess, somewhere near the square, and you could ride it toward the mountain or park at the mountain and ride it toward here. It's probably 3 miles to the mountain or something? It's not that far.
I think it's like 3.5 miles to the mountain.
Yeah. And then what happens past the mountain? Where does it go?
I don't know, but if you go the other way,
does it end up in Kennesaw?
Like
it ends up by the school? Like
I think
KSU?
so. I think so. KSU, no, I don't think the mountain's by KSU because that's over at like exit 3. But
that's true.
I don't know.
Anyway.
I haven't been past the mountain. So
it's a nice little stretch, and I totally forget. So you biked that with your daughter.
I did. And then it was fun.
Where did you park your bikes to go eat?
Inside the office.
Oh, you parked them.
Well, you can't leave them on your bike rack because I don't want them to steal it.
I just pictured you like attaching it to a tree or something.
No, I actually put it inside the office. I was like, put it in here locked. So I didn't think you'd mind.
That's funny. It's on a Saturday?
Yeah. It was great. It was fun.
Cool.
We had a good time.
Yeah. So come bike the Wiser Mile and, maybe you'll see Shauna and Lily running.
Absolutely. Come say hi to us.
Biking down the path. Oh my gosh. I never even thought about doing that.
Well, we should have a work outing where we all go bike the mile.
It's going to be like 17 of us now.
I know, that'd be fun.
They'd be like, oh my God, there's a gang.
That's funny. Is there a race somewhere?
It's a race.
Or a race, yes.
Oh, it'd probably turn into a race.
Maybe. Probably.
There's a few of us that are very competitive. we do the 3 miles in 30 seconds.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's good exercise.
I probably should buy a bike. All right. So let's talk about pensions. I've seen this recently on a few, honestly, it kind of came to mind, this whole topic, with all the government layoffs. I don't want to get into the politics of that, but the government spends $2 trillion more than it's supposed to. So, if you had a company that was, shedding that much cash, there would be layoffs there too.
Yeah.
So, overall, I think, yes, maybe some government employees are hurt by this, but at the same time, and unemployment continues to drop. So they're getting private sector jobs overall, I guess, was what the data says.
Yeah.
But needless to say, I saw this interview and there was a young lady who said, well, I had just gotten the job and I had this pension. I thought I was set. Mm-hmm. And I started thinking about that. I was like, are you set? I don't know. I mean, I guess in how you think about things.
Yeah.
Because you would have So a federal worker would have Social Security
Social Security,
and would have a pension.
and then benefits too, usually like medical
Yeah,
benefits,
pretty
depending
good
on
medical
where. Right.
benefits. But I guess if you were a little more ambitious and you're in the private sector doing a job,
Making more money
yeah,
and
that's what I
saving
think
more.
is making 60 to $80,000 as a government worker. Is it better to be making 150 in the
Right.
private sector?
And then saving and creating your own pension,
Yeah,
if you will, or your own.
because the if you started early enough, you're going to grow way more money
Yeah.
in the stock market than you are waiting for a pension to develop over time.
Yeah.
Now there are other situations like firemen.
Yeah.
Firemen have a very short work lifespan, and I've seen some of them go be firemen, then they max out their pension, and they say, "Okay, you're done now,"
Yeah.
and then they go work somewhere else for another pension, and then this is one case.
Yeah.
He worked somewhere else. When they came to us, they had finishing up a third career. So he literally had like 3 pensions and Social Security.
Yeah.
That's pretty good
Yeah.
when you think about it. Or military people who work the full time, but what, 20 years,
Yeah. And then they have
and then
their.
they come out, and if they're pilots, they then go fly in the airlines.
Yeah.
Airlines don't have pensions anymore. Most of them don't, but
But their funding is like a pension because the
yeah,
company
but
contributes so
that's
much.
also different because military pilots get paid pretty good money.
Yeah.
They have to pay them some type of market rate, or else they would all just leave and go fly for the airlines,
Yeah.
right?
Well, we see people come out of the military, have their pension. They're relatively young because they wanted the service early.
That's
And then
true.
they go in corporate America and they may not have a pension per se, but I mean, some corporations still have pensions. There are very few in
Yeah.
between, though. Some banks do. I know
So
judges do. I know that's not corporate, but
I think what we're gonna we'll go through our points here, but I think what we're gonna come to the conclusion on is it really depends on what your job function is.
mhm,
I mean, if you were a secretary or an assistant, and in the private sector, you're not getting paid more than $100,000, I wouldn't think.
right.
Where the government, you might be getting paid $80,000.
Yeah.
Maybe the difference is, yeah, it's better to have that pension and everything else. Teachers,
Teachers, right. I was just thinking that.
teaching in private school is typically a calling.
Yeah. Well, and then the WEP has gone away too
Yeah,
for
that's right.
most teachers
Right.
where they were
I feel
had
like very few
reduction.
teachers were affected by that.
Yeah.
I feel like there weren't whole states. It's county by county as
Right.
to who was put into Social Security, who wasn't. So I think we're gonna come to the conclusion that maybe it's dependent on each family and each circumstance.
Right.
But
It's individualized for sure.
but you know, people call them the golden handcuffs, which I've always associated that to be with really bad CEOs.
Well,
Right.
well, that's fair. But I mean, if you like what you're doing and it pays you well and you get, I don't know if I would stay
because there's a pension.
right. I don't know that you would stay somewhere where you're completely, I don't know. I guess some people would stay where they're completely unhappy just to get the payout of the pension.
I mean, there's other types of pension like things like stock options, retirement
Mhm.
benefits, other things that might keep you in a situation because you have this equity or whatever you would lose if you left.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen a lot of corporations put those in place because they don't have pensions anymore. But the way that they compensate is maybe they do restricted stock units or
Mhm.
they put a portion of your bonus per se in like a deferred compensation or some sort of deferral or, payout of RSUs.
Yeah.
And then it pays out over 3 years, at a certain period of time in the future. And so that kind of always holds you because they're always rolling and every year you vest and you get
Yeah.
more and more and more. And, your pay today is going in there and you don't get it for 3 years, as far as like bonus or incentives. And so that to me is more of a golden handcuff because that can start getting really large, especially if
True.
the stock's doing well. So, you'd be walking away from a large sum of money that you're not vested in yet, which I guess you could say is true of a pension because that, depending on how long you live, right? That could be a large payout potentially
So
over
what's the,
time.
so what do you think the value of a pension is?
The value in terms of the value of a pension, where I see it is just like Social Security. It helps you reduce how much you're actually going to take from assets you saved. If you are just solely relying on pension and social security, depending on what you spend, it may not be enough.
Yeah.
Because over time costs can go up. And typically when you see a lot of inflation, the people, in my opinion, where inflation hurts the worst is when you're raising families, you're buying all the stuff, you're buying clothes each year and you're buying all the school stuff and you're always buying goods. And so inflation hits you really hard. Whereas when you're retired, the big ticket items is where you really get hurt, when you're buying a car or something
Mhm.
like that. And so if the inflation is not keeping up with pensions, and social security, then, you really have to have other savings, but it helps you from taking out over time out of your investments if you are saving to investments. So I see the value in that. Um, you know, because it really can help with that 4% rule we've talked about, living with your means and not
Mhm.
taking, a large amount from your investments. And so if you have more income sources, that can really help prolong or preserve your assets for you or for the next generation. So I think that's a powerful tool.
I mean,
Um,
our planning software would look at a pension and count it as guaranteed income.
yeah,
So it definitely boosts the probability long term.
yeah, exactly. And it helps if, you become ill and it preserves your assets longer.
Before we jump back into the episode, do you know if you are ready to take off and launch into retirement? Get your pre retirement checklist, a free guide from Wiser Wealth Management. From cash flow to Social Security, we've got your countdown covered. Go to wiserinvestor.com/guides to download your free guide today. Now let's get back to the episode.
I don't know. I've seen too many pensions fail.
We're talking about private pensions,
Right.
not public pensions. Yeah.
Right. I've seen too many pensions fail, even in retirement. Now there's an insurance to help cover that.
Right.
So I never look at it as a guarantee. It could go away or be reduced as long as it's covered by that insurance, which most are in the private sector. It's just, I don't look at it as a guarantee. And usually, depending on what you elect at the time, which I know we'll get into that, sometimes there's not a beneficiary if it's a non-spouse, and so I'm always a fan of a lump sum pension too, if you get that option, if it works with your plan.
Yep.
I like that because that to me is more of a guarantee
Yeah.
that, and not guarantee that it's going to be there. Cause obviously if you put it in the market, it could, but the way we invest money, it could last a long time. And, you know, I'm a fan that if it works with your plan to do a lump sum and you have that option, that maybe you consider that.
Yeah. Well, we have calculators for that.
Yeah.
A lot of times a lump sum is better.
Just because you control it.
Yeah. Especially if a husband and wife, and let's say you passed away early,
Yeah.
then that money can go to the kids, where
What if you both die in a car crash?
otherwise, yeah, the company wins.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So guaranteed income, survivor benefits, right? So you'd be guaranteeing your spouse, or usually that's an option, that they could continue to getting payments, or at least a lesser payment.
That's always a question that we get too. It's like, what should I elect? There's all these options. When you go to take it, you have to decide right there.
Right.
Do you want the lump sum? Do you want the 50% survivor, 75%? No, none, and that's a calculation of how long are you going to live and how long is your spouse going to live.
Right.
So,
What do you think that some of the downsides are to waiting on a pension?
the downsides to waiting on a pension, probably, I don't know, maybe being in some place you feel stuck. You're not really happy with your job.
What if you hate your job?
Yeah. But you feel like you have to stay there because it's such a payout. I had a good friend of mine who left the private sector and went back to work for government position for a time period just so she could get that pension. And she wasn't happy with the move, but she felt like she had to do it because, they felt like they had saved enough for retirement, and having that potential income in retirement was beneficial to her because they hadn't really saved enough. And so she left a job she really loved to go back to a government position that she didn't really care for, that she wasn't happy. And she's actually
Yeah.
still there right now. So she kind of feels stuck.
Yeah. I don't know. It's hard if you're unable to save on your own, like I was having a conversation with a teacher recently who kind of fell on some harder times
Mhm.
and tried their hand in real estate and that didn't really work out. And I started thinking is like, man, like you're way behind on just finances. So what's the best thing to do? And yeah, probably the best thing is return to public school and go after that pension. They'd already had like 12 years of public
Yeah.
school work.
Yeah.
So you're only talking another 18 years to get fully vested in the pension.
Yeah.
Um, so it sort of makes sense where that's not where the person's heart was. Person's heart was in a
Yeah.
private Christian school.
Yeah.
But if you stay that route, you'd have to save a lot of money at an older age to hit the same number.
Yeah.
So those are just hard decisions. So I could see how you'd be dissatisfied in your job, waiting for you're just
Yeah.
waiting for a day. And then what if you had health complications
Yeah.
in your early retirement years? I mean, that'd be horrible.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Those are always tough conversations. And also too, what if you're limited to that position? What if you never grow?
Yeah. There's
But
no advancement
yeah,
place to advance or grow your
yeah.
income.
And private pensions, they could take them away and you might get frozen. Of course, at that point, if it's just frozen, you've already accumulated the time.
Yeah.
So I guess then you could certainly leave and look for greener pastures, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, those are things to think about. What do you think some factors are to be, what factors should we consider before we decide to stay or go?
I look at your financial plan first and foremost, the numbers, and you can't make every single decision based on just the numbers.
Yeah.
Looking at when are you going to vest in these things? What are the vesting? If you're really close to vesting in something, maybe, waiting another year or two is better than waiting a decade, So, I
Right.
mean, if you're close to vesting to something, look at that. Um, you know, Other factors like we talked about earlier, savings into 401k, retirement accounts, et cetera. Is there another way if you were to change positions that you could get a similar? So in other words, you could run the numbers and say, if I stayed here and get this pension, this is what it looks like. But if I stay, if I move here, which, you have to weigh that. Are you happier there? Could you potentially make more and then save more to a retirement account? And maybe your financial plan looks similar,
Well, that's the benefit of using a financial advisor. I don't know that people actually go and calculate this before they make these decisions.
Right.
I feel like they just go, I'm going to go here and yeah, it pays more and that should be fine. But there's really this back of the napkin kind of math.
True. And I feel like sometimes we take that for granted, the tools that we have accessible, because it's like, oh, just run the numbers. But
Right.
It's not that easy for the layman person to just go, oh, let's run the numbers. It's like, well, how does it take into consideration taxes? Does it, because most of these pensions are taxable.
Right.
And if you take the lump sum, you roll it to an IRA, and then there's required minimum distribution. So there's so many moving pieces to running the numbers, the returns, the taxes, there's so many different moving pieces. Unless you had a planning software, I don't know that you could just run the numbers, We always like to do the break even calculation. That's a simple calculation though. When you're running numbers of what's better,
that'd be like lump sum versus the
Right.
annuity. But what I'm talking about is your mid-career, you're 35, 40 years old.
Yeah.
Then what do how do you make that decision?
Yeah.
Because you don't know the future. So there would be some risk involved. Maybe this whole thing comes down to just a person's risk profile. Maybe staying at the government job. I say government job, but it could be any pension job. You stay at the pension
There's
job.
just not that many corporations that have pensions anymore.
Not
Some of
many.
them do, but they don't offer it that much anymore.
Yeah.
So that makes me feel like maybe you should stay and find a position you like at a corporation if they have it. Because normally it's only big corporations that even have them.
Yeah, that's true.
So you can move around internally potentially.
Yeah.
But again, to your point, they could go away because I've seen them go away.
I mean, ideally you're saving in a pension and you're maxing out your 401k plan.
That's
and
right.
You're doing backdoor Roths and you're doing all these things ideally, right? And
Yeah.
then,
If the cash flow sustains.
then the plan looks really, really good.
Right. Exactly.
I think for our airline clients, for the pilots especially, that's kind of a no-brainer. If you enjoy the military work, stick around long enough to collect the pension Because when you come out, you're getting 18% of what you make into your 401k plan.
Yeah.
That's like a pension in and of itself, really.
Exactly. And that's what they put in. That's what they put into place after the pension went away in 08 and 09.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. And most, most people in corporate don't get that kind of contribution at all.
No.
Or a pension. So, they're few
we do a
and far
6%
between.
match here. I feel like that's a little
that's rich.
Not normal.
It isn't. I've seen them go down to like 4 mainly.
Yeah.
So,
well, I think it comes down to, it depends on the family situation. You got to do the math. This is where a financial advisor can help you do those calculations. We do a lot of those in our one-time flat fee service.
Yeah.
To help people make those decisions. We did a ton of that stuff in 2020 when everybody was changing jobs. But I would not just go based on how you feel about it. I would actually put some data behind it. But also, if you're going to create the formula, maybe 50% of it is real math and what you need to be doing. And then the other 50% is how you feel about working. I mean, you get one life to live. I don't know if you're slaving away because, this pension's better for us. Now, if it's the difference between not paying your mortgage,
right, working till you're 80, or
right, exactly. Then there's some common sense that has to kick in there to find joy somewhere.
Yeah.
But anyway, thanks for doing this topic, Sean. I thought I just saw that clip and I was like, is it really better to stick around for a pension? Are we really seeking jobs because they have a good pension?
Yeah.
I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a risk taker.
Right.
So in my mind, I'm like, why would you do anything for that?
Limit yourself.
Go create, something. But not everyone has my brain and how they think about things either.
No, not at all. And sometimes it's the safety of, guarantees as much as there is a guarantee, but again, a lot of these are backed up by insurance too. So there is, and then obviously the government has the power of taxation. So.
Well, if you're thinking about this topic for yourself, you're probably in your 50s, because it seems like everyone that tries to decide what they want to do with their pension is in their 50s. So we have an episode from a long time ago, episode 137, Financial Planning in Your 50s. So you can kind of use that as a litmus test on where you should be and how you should be thinking. Also, we have a YouTube channel, A Wiser Retirement. What's the difference between pensions and IRAs? How much is Social Security reduced if you have a pension? Actually, that's a trick question. It's not really reduced anymore.
Right.
So
it was.
That's been a positive change. Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you want to learn more about us or our fiduciary financial advisors, you can do so by going to wiserinvestor.com or click in the episode notes. See you guys next week. Thanks, Sean.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening to a Wiser Retirement podcast. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Make sure to subscribe wherever you're listening. That way you don't miss any new episodes. We'd also appreciate if you could leave a rating and review. If you have any questions about anything that was discussed today, head to wiserinvestor.com and reach out. This podcast is strictly for informational purposes only and is not to be considered as investment advice or solicitation to buy or sell any financial products, securities, digital assets, or any other investment vehicles, or a basis to make any financial decisions. Wiser Wealth Management Incorporated is a registered investor advisor with the SEC. The host and/or guests may personally own securities, digital assets, or other investment vehicles mentioned on this podcast. Neither the host nor guests of the show are compensated for their participation, and no referral fees are paid to or received by any host or guest for clients, listeners, or similar interests. Investments involve risk, and unless otherwise stated, are not guaranteed. Be sure to first consult with a qualified financial advisor, tax professional, insurance professional, and/or legal professional before implementing any strategy discussed herein. Past performance is not indicative of future performance.